What does racism look like to you?
So, for me, I think my ideas about racism are couched with my experience with Siksika primarily, and so I think when I think about racism, I think about overt racism, and having worked in the Siksika education system for more than 2 decades, what normally comes to me is the stories of the children, of the students that I taught over those many years, talking about the absolute overt racism that they have faced off reserve. So coming into our community, being followed in stores, being insulted, being openly attacked only because of their race. One of my friends going to have some work done on her vehicle, and she asked to use the bathroom, and she's a beautiful Cree woman, and she went up and asked to use the bathroom, and they gave her the keys that said to her, we don't usually do this because Indians want to use our washroom, not knowing that she was Indigenous. And so from that overt style of racism, I've seen tremendous suffering. Young people who felt less because they were judged and found wanting. People my age coming into this community, being followed in stores, incredibly beautiful, respected members of community who, because of the color of their skin, because of their nationality, were targeted. Young people telling me that they couldn't drive into our community without being stopped by police. I think so. That type of overt racism, I think, is my experience, and also my youngest son is Black, and so in this community, he experienced racism, and he would be the first to say that the racism that he experienced was limited, and it was and he certainly himself saw racism against Indigenous people as being far worse what he experienced. But I remember him as a 16-year-old saying to me, will there ever be a time in this community when I won't walk through a door skin first, when that won't be the first thing that they see? And he certainly experienced. I remember my husband and I having an appointment with the RCMP to discuss that he had been stopped 4 times in one day, and twice had the carpet torn out of his trunk. He was, I think at that time, possibly the only young Black man in town. And so those are the kinds of overt racism. We saw him one time be kicked out of a store because of the color of his skin. So those are the overt racism. But the other thing that I've seen, and it comes from the beautiful teachings of the Siksika elders that I've had, that Kimapit, and the kindness that they have shown me, that has educated me about systemic racism. And so it's also being able to look at how the systems that we all function under in our society are systemically racist. So it is a subconscious thing on the part of most of us, but it is something that we need to deliberately address. So why don't we have more Indigenous parents sitting on our hockey boards, and why don't we have Indigenous parents sitting on our parent advisory committees? And those are things that are systemic. Why do we consistently have Indigenous people saying that they're not treated the same in our hospital waiting rooms? Not just in this community. So those are the things that I see that are systemic, that we can really actively deal with, and that we need to deal with.
How have you experienced or witnessed racism?
So on a very different kind of answer to that question, I guess my experience of racism is what I haven't experienced. So one of the things that my Siksika elders have shown me very, very specifically is that my white privilege has made me not face the same kind of discrimination that people of color have faced. I never think, when I walk into a big box store or to a grocery store or to a drugstore, I never ever think once that people might be following me. So my white privilege has given me an idea of how I haven't experienced racism. Being with my son who is Black, with my son-in-law who's Black, and my mixed race grandchildren, seeing that they have experienced racism. So I've experienced it secondhand. My granddaughter, who's in grade 8, recently was really traumatized because she was told by a group of her fellow classmates that she couldn't join them because she wasn't black enough. And so I think that those are the ways that I've experienced racism, but what has most profoundly touched me is the racism that I haven't experienced. But from I think from my own personal perspective, the one time that I remember experiencing racism profoundly, and I was grateful for it because it showed me what the people that I really love and respect, what they go through every day. I was driving on 16th Avenue in Calgary, and I had the window down in my vehicle, and my students had been recording their drumming, and so they had a drumming group, and they had been recording their drumming, and they gave me a recording, and they were getting ready for summer powwow season, and I was playing this recording in my vehicle with the window down, and I was stopped at a long light on 16th Avenue, and the person in the vehicle next to me got out of his vehicle, and he came over and he pounded on the doorpost of my vehicle and said, "Shut off that bleeping Indian crap and go back to where you belong." And I was stunned that this had happened. I was also conversely glad that it had happened because it showed me in a really direct and profound way what the people that I loved, what they face every single day. So that's the only experience that I've had directly.
How do you say no to racism?
I would have to go back to my teachings, and I say no to racism by being filled with gratitude for the 35 years that I've been able to work with Indigenous people, and that they have been so kind to me and so careful in their kindness. So they've taught me that most people are willing to learn, and that most people are willing to change, and that I can say no to racism by acknowledging my own racism, my own incidental white privilege, and having these wonderful teachers who would not let me take things for granted, who would not let me assume when things were wrong, and who consistently forgave me for mistakes that I've made, and I have made so many mistakes. And instead of condemning me as a racist or as somebody filled with white privilege, they just simply continued to teach me and to convince me of the necessity of having to reach out to other people in the non-Indigenous community to also teach those lessons. And so saying no to racism in that way has been an amazing experience for me. And the other thing I think for me is in the learning part. I always think about the words of Cindy Blackstock. She CBC commentator and advocate for children, for Indigenous children across Canada. And I heard her speak one time, and have heard her said many times, that when you go to do this work, that there has to be purposefulness. And for me, the purposefulness that she articulated so beautifully is in this statement that she said, we have to do this work so that no Indigenous child ever has to grow up again to heal, and that no non-Indigenous child ever has to grow up to say they're sorry. So for me, that's how I say no to racism. And as I said, I think that I'm most grateful for the teachers that I've had, and being able to simply give over to their great wisdom.